Okay, everyone, it's me, Jen, and I am here with John, and I got the name right, I think, Bockenstead. Bockenstead, right?
You did well.
Okay.
That's how half of the family says it.
Half of the family says it, and shout out to Ken from the ALP podcast, well, all podcasts. Did I just say that wrong? Anyway, who taught me how to say it right. John, welcome. And I see your Oregon State in the background.
Yeah, it's one of the many pictures of Oregon State I have in the for my backgrounds.
Okay. So, John, let me start with this question that I always start with because I have a lot of students who feel like admissions officers lie to them because, they just believe that it's so competitive and you have to have an inside source and the information put out to the public is just not the correct information. How do we know that you, as an admissions officer, are going to be honest when you're speaking to students?
Well, you don't, you never know anybody's honest, whether you're talking to a teacher, a car salesperson, your pastor, you sort of have to at some point come to a level of trust with people that you respect and you believe. I guess I would say, do they tell the truth about other things that you've asked? That would be a good sort of indicator. But it's put yourself in the place of the admissions officer. So let's say a student comes up to you and says, I want to apply to Harvard, test optional. I have a 3.2 GPA, and I'm pretty sure that since I don't have tests, I'm going to be getting admitted, right? It's not your job necessarily to dash dreams on the rocks, right? Because it's like, should I buy a lottery ticket? Well, probably not, but 1 in a million, you might have a chance. So you would probably, as a professional, never say, don't apply because you have zero chance. Or you may say that, but a lot of companies,
I would add to the list at that point.
You might say, however, you shouldn't get your hopes up about Harvard. And so the admissions officer is kind of in the same place when they're talking to students, right? It may be that you're telling me about your 3.2 GPA, but there's a lot that you're not telling me. And if there's something, you're the best trumpet player in the state of Texas, right? That can make a difference at some places. And if I don't know that, and I don't know that I don't know that, I'm going to say, if this is your dream school, give it a shot. So a lot of times admissions officers aren't exactly lying, but really the reality is you can't make a decision on a student until you've seen their complete folder. So the thing is, triangulate, get information from not just the admissions officer, but from a trusted counselor, from someone at your high school, from other people. Stay away from things like College Confidential because nobody in there knows what they're talking about. But someone who's knowledgeable and trustful, and I think you'll do a pretty good job of getting good advice.
I tell people all the time, take the information. If you're going to go on the internet, if you're going to go on YouTube, you're going to go on Reddit, you're going to go on TikTok, take that information, put it all together, and then run it by an admissions officer. And then if you're not comfortable with that admissions officer, talk to another admissions officer. Would you agree, though, it's your job to help students feel more prepared for the application process if they come to you? Because I know you're in enrollment. That's a little bit different. Is it a little bit different than admissions?
Well, admissions is one of the offices that reports to me. But I have to tell you, I'm used to lawyers asking questions, Jen. And the one thing a lawyer will always do is, wouldn't you agree that, that's a really good way to get someone into a trap.
Yeah, you start nodding. Yeah.
Yeah. Right. Yeah, sure. I agree. What did you just say?
Yeah, you start nodding and you actually lean in a little bit. That's what they taught us. You lean in and you start like subtly nodding.
Exactly. So now I forgot the question you just asked me because
I forgot the question too. The question was, do you feel like if the student comes to you and wants to be more prepared for the application process, it's your job to help them feel better prepared and or more confident?
Oh, if someone asks me, I will always give them tips about what kind of things they could do, whether they're applying here or they're applying someplace else. I'm part of the reason people get into this job is because, they want to see students succeed, right? And for me, we talk a lot about first generation college students. I was a first generation high school student. My parents finished their education at the 8th grade. And so I know what a college education has done for me and where it's gotten me. And I want everyone to be able to take advantage of that if they possibly can. So whether you come here, if you're looking at our biggest competitor and you ask me for advice, I'll give you good advice about the college application process in general, even though you might not end up at my institution. So,
okay. Yeah. Okay. And then the question I was going to ask you before we look over your amazing tool is this. What a lot of students are really hesitant about test optional, and they get a lot of different information from different sources. I know a lot of guidance counselors in this area have just been swamped, not necessarily able to kind of jump into test optional, even though it's not necessarily new. And the one thing I hear from students a lot is, I'm worried about applying test optional. I feel like it's a checklist and I'm missing part of the checklist. But then also, if I have low grades, that my SAT or ACT score could improve my overall chances. What would you say to that?
Well, so if your GPA sort of is on the borderline of what a college or university usually looks at. So let's say, their general guideline would say you need to be a 3.8 and you're a 3.73, right? A really high test score can probably help you. If you're a student who comes from a place or a school where that college, university doesn't know you, it's possible a high test score could help you. But on the other hand, I think you have to trust people when they say test optional means test optional. Now, a lot of places, a lot of people are looking at statistics that say, well, your admission chances are better if you have tests. Look at these data that are published by this institution or that institution. And that's a statistical error or a mistake that you're making by leading to that conclusion. The students last year who had tests were already the students who were likely to be admitted because as juniors, they had parents who could fly them to Montana to an open spot, right? And we know wealth gives you a tremendous advantage. They had the connections to get into the very few number of testing slots that were open. Those are the kids that are going to get into college at the top places just because they are who they are, not necessarily because they had tests. So, Lee Coffin at Dartmouth put out something where he said on the web, said, when we say optional, we mean optional. We really mean, and the good thing is, Jeremiah Quinlan, the Dean of Admissions at Yale, talked on an NPR story. I think it was one that I was actually mentioned in. That's why I read it. And he said, evaluating students without scores was a lot easier than we thought it was going to be. You just have to take a little extra time and read the transcript. And so I think this year might be different with regard to test optional. And I think colleges and universities might really be saying more, they always said it, they might really believe it a little more, that test, just like, submitting a musical performance is optional, or submitting, that leadership or what the additional recommendation or whatever. All those things may help, but people are realizing that tests are not the things that we used to think they are.
So I think one question I get a lot is, if I don't feel confident, but I really think I'm a good candidate, should I still just apply?
Well, within some boundaries, I would say yes.
Okay.
If so on one hand, you have students who are saying, I just need to go to a top 20 school, right? That's their criteria.
Okay. Yeah, that happens.
Yeah, if that's the thing, I'm not sure you're really going to be genuinely happy any place you go. But if you're saying, of all the top 50 schools, there are two that I really feel in sync with. You know, I like the way they approach education. I like this, that, or the other thing. Then I would say, yeah, presuming you can either get a fee waiver or the fee does not pose a financial hardship to you, go for it. I mean,
Right.
there's nothing wrong with dreaming. There is something kind of wrong, I guess, emotionally with just doing a shotgun effect and applying to all the schools that, you see on Instagram, right?
Yeah. I think that's the thing is one of the things I try to tell students is that the 4 years actually does matter. And there is this kind of perception that if I mess up this application, if I don't do everything right, if I don't do everything perfect, if I don't hit every element of the checklist, I'm just not going to get in. And it kind of takes the pressure off of the 4 years and puts it all onto admissions. And I try to tell my students that those 4 years that you did, the things that you've done over the last 4 years, the portfolio essentially that you've built academically, service wise, even if, especially my students who are working and doing their jobs, those matter. The things that you've done matter. And if you have enough, when I was talking to Dean Jay, she compared it to ice cream in the bowl, right? Like if you have enough ice cream in the bowl, it doesn't matter what sprinkles you put on it or what nuts or what, it's a, for her, she said, it's like a sprinkle to me. The SAT is like a sprinkle. It's sometimes it's, oh, okay, that's nice. And then other times it has no impact because there's enough ice cream in the bowl. So I think just teaching students that the 4 years matter. Now, you said something about Instagram colleges. How do you actually pick a college? And I know you have a tool for this. And I think I have my screen open so that you can share let's start with what drove you to create this?
Well, a couple things. First of all, I'm always just interested in data for its own sake. And people who I'm going to give you a link that you can share with your students, and you'll like the link when you see it. It's a part of my blog where I take higher education data and try to visualize it and put it in context for people. It's just I think there are interesting patterns in the data that aren't obvious to people on first blush. I think visualizing the data gives people an opportunity to see the scope and the scale and the patterns in data that might not always be apparent and obvious. So that's one of the reasons I do it. Usually I'm doing something like this for my work anyway, and I can take a few extra steps and make it relevant for a high school student or a college administrator or a parent who's trying to find something. So this, when I was looking at our university's degrees and what we offer degrees in and how that's changed over time, and it's evolved into this. So I want to get back to something you said a couple of seconds ago about the 4 years mattering. And I know you meant the 4 years of high school.
Yeah.
But one night, my wife and I were on our deck with a colleague who had worked in college admissions for about 40 years, and her husband. And my wife said, college is becoming like a Kardashian wedding. And I wrote about this on my WordPress blog. And I said, what do you mean? She said, well, all of it is the buildup and the hype and the stuff that happens before the actual wedding. And it doesn't seem to be about the marriage.
Right.
And so she said, and I think she was dead on, she said, anymore, it's all about the application process. And no one really thinks about what's going to happen the 4 years after you enroll at a place.
Yeah.
And so I think if students paid a lot more attention to what they do when they get to college, wherever that is, as opposed to the focus and the energy that they drain themselves of by focusing on the application, I think everything would be a lot better.
Yeah, I think the one thing I hear a lot is you have to find a college that makes you feel like at home. And I hate that because if you go to an expensive college, it's going to feel like a resort. It's going to feel like a good home, right? That doesn't necessarily mean it's the right place for you to be for the next 4 years. If somebody had told me, I thought when I went to Virginia Tech, I thought it was Christopher Newport. So I thought it was in the beach. It was in the mountains. It's very completely different. if I had gone there, without my acceptance, I probably would have just crossed it off my list because it would have been cold at the time, whatever. But it was a right college for me, just in terms of size and scope and some of the opportunities there. And I think sometimes we get caught up in how does it feel? And then that feeling translates into people paying more for certain types of amenities, as opposed to, is this the right place to develop me as a leader? And had I gone to, my plan was to go to either CNU or UVA. Had I gone to UVA, it would have been a horrible, as somebody who went to UVA for law school, would have been a horrible fit for undergrad. But I didn't know that as, a 17-year-old, that I really needed a school that didn't have cutthroat competition at the undergrad level, allowed you to have more undergraduate research opportunities. I didn't know that. But looking back in hindsight, that's really what improved my experience. So I think when you're looking for colleges, don't just look at, it's going to feel good at most colleges. That's the job, is to make it feel good. But what are you looking at in terms of where do you want to be 4 years from now? And then also factoring in for almost every student, if you need to go to grad school, are you going to have the financial space and then the academic space to grow into the next chapter?
Right. Yep, absolutely. Okay.
All right.
So I'm going to drop a link into the chat here, and you can keep this and you can use it with your students.
Oh, I love the link.
So you can just save that, and it should work forever, and it'll be easy for you to remember, and it will take you right to the visualization that I'm going to share in a second. So I'm going to see if I can share my screen here. Let me move a few things around. Let me move you up there. Let me move this over here and maximize it. And there we go. All right. Can you see my screen?
I can. This is very fancy.
Okay. So when you're a university or a college that receives federal financial aid, you're required to report thousands of pieces of information to the federal government every year. Okay. Right? And one of the things that you do is the number of degrees awarded, associates, certificates, bachelor's, master's, doctoral degrees, by something called a SIP code, which is just the code for the major, so that they can roll up things that have slightly different names, right? And so you can download that data if you have the time and the energy, and you've gotten good at it. And I've just been practicing a lot on it, so I know how to use it. It's kind of a complex system. But then you can just structure that data to help people see things and find things and do stuff. So there's two ways this works, and I'm going to show you the step-by-step way first, and I'm going to show you the freestyle way if you'd rather freestyle. Okay. So there we go. So Jen, tell me the broadest academic major that you might be interested in, and it listed from agriculture, everything else, business, communications, education, health services, human services, humanities, social sciences, STEM, which of course is science, technology, and engineering, and visual and performing arts. So just pick one.
I'm going to do humanities.
You're going to do humanities. All right. All right. So we click humanities, and it goes to red because all the humanities majors are red. And now we see in the US in 2020, English languages and literature is the biggest major in the humanities with 33,000 undergraduate degrees listed. I was an English major, so this makes me very happy. General liberal arts and studies, general studies, Spanish, surprisingly, is the fourth biggest.
It's growing, yeah.
Yeah, philosophy, creative writing, religion and religious studies, Talmudic studies, foreign languages and literature. And you can, if you want to get down in the weeds, you can scroll down all the way and see, there were 448 Latin American studies degrees awarded. Wow. So that gives you a sort of broad degree of what the majors are in the humanities, if you're interested in that.
Okay.
But then it shows the institutions that awarded the most degrees in the humanities at the bottom. And so,
Mm,
enough, UVA.
UVA, yeah.
And I
That's
don't know what
surprising. Not surprising, but surprising, yeah.
yeah, we'll get there in a second. But so that's step one. Step two, do you want to narrow down your choice? So
Okay.
you say, it's I don't like English literature, I want philosophy, or you might say I don't like philosophy, I want English literature. And this is a multiple select, so you can choose a couple different things. So
Okay,
grab a couple. Tell me what you want.
let's do English literature and philosophy and
Okay.
liberal arts and general studies.
Oh my gosh,
Yeah, I'm gonna do three. I was a triple major because I just kept
English,
adding things. Yeah.
Okay. Right. So now the biggest institution is Excelsior College, followed by UVA, followed by Southern New Hampshire. Now, if you know anything about Excelsior and Southern New Hampshire, those are not typical residential campuses, right?
Okay.
But we're gonna ignore that for now. This is where using this with an expert or someone you trust can come in handy. So step three is choose the college type. Do you want public? Do you want private? Or do you want for-profit?
I think I want to do public and private.
Public and private. So you want to take out for-profit schools. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
Probably a good choice for a lot of people. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
Now the results update. And actually Excelsior must be private. I thought it was a for-profit. So University of North Texas, look at that. I mean, that's kind of surprising. You wouldn't think it's a big school, so it makes sense. But we're still looking at places like Liberty, which has a lot of online distance education, NYU, Brigham Young, which overwhelmingly for students from the LDS church. If you're not from that church, that might not be something you want to explore. George Mason, also in Virginia, right?
Love George Mason.
You get a really good list of colleges and universities that you might want to start thinking about. And you see how many degrees that they offer in those areas. Step four, now that you have chosen humanities, English, philosophy, and what was the third one? I can't remember.
General studies, yeah.
Yeah, chose college. Did you use general studies?
I did it in the third one.
Okay. And you've chosen public and private. Now college size. What are you interested in?
So, and I guess that's the biggest question for me is, so for me, I would say 5,000, like I would keep 20,000 and I would just get rid of the smaller colleges.
Okay, so you want a big.
Yeah, I want a big college, but a lot of students kind of struggle with this because I think they assume big college means that I'm always going to have 500 lecture. How do you advise students like college size?
Well, at this point, a student who's saying, I can't decide anything about size, just checks all and moves to step 5.
Right.
And so where do you want to go to school? What states would you consider?
Let's say Virginia, Maryland, DC.
Virginia, Maryland, DC. All right. So select everything goes away. Virginia. MD, right? Where's MD?
It's a little bit up.
Oh, there it is.
Is DC listed as a state here?
It is.
Oh, okay.
So of all the institutions in Maryland, Virginia, who offer degrees in liberal arts, general studies, or philosophy, UVA is the top campus, followed by Liberty, George Mason, James Madison, Old Dominion, University of Mary Washington. Okay.
Yeah.
More than University of Maryland, College Park. So there's something that's interesting to me, right? I never would have guessed that University of Mary Washington had more humanities majors in these areas than UMD.
Well, they've been building it out in the last couple of years, I think.
Well,
that's what I remember.
But you would think the biggest, a much bigger institution would have more. You got the Naval Academy, you've got McDaniel College, you've got Goucher, you've got Eastern Mennonite, all these.
Virginia State, yep. What's actually surprising to me is like I'm seeing some colleges that I thought were bigger in terms of this. And it's really interesting to kind of see that in terms of when you thought a college had more in that program and you find out what they're actually doing as compared to what they say they're doing, right?
Yeah. Now, just for demonstration purposes, obviously, big universities are going to offer more degrees in that area, right? So let's just say that the student says, you know, I really want a school of under 5,000 students. So you can click there, and you can see University of Mary Washington offered 83 liberal arts and general studies degrees. I must have 4 selected here. 46 liberal arts and general studies, 64 English language and literature, and 19 in philosophy. You come farther and you say, you know what, let's not think about English. Let's just think about philosophy, right? You don't really hear a lot about philosophy. So who among small colleges in DC, Maryland,
wow, that changed everything.
offers, I might have checked the wrong one here. Oh, philosophy. Okay.
Yeah.
So yeah. So you have a couple yeshivas, right? Which mostly for students who are studying to become rabbis, and those may not be of interest to you, or they may be. Who knows, right? University of Mary Washington, Goucher, Mount St. Mary's, McDaniel, Newport, Christopher Newport, Richmond, Randolph-Macon. So this isn't going to tell you where you should study.
Yeah.
It's going to tell you which institutions might be a good place to start creating your institution for. And, you know, probably everybody in DC, Maryland, Virginia has heard about Goucher, right? But maybe they haven't heard about Randolph-Macon. And so this is a good opportunity for students to think about and explore and find out about new institutions. And you can just hover and you can say in 2020, 8 bachelor's degree in religion, philosophy, and religious studies. Click the wrong box there. But anyway, you can see how this works, right?
Yeah. And I think then it's a good, especially if it's 8, like if you're looking, I know that we're looking at the smaller colleges, but if you're looking at a bigger college and you're seeing that even at that big college, they're only doing this many degrees, that might be a smaller program within a bigger college. So that's really interesting.
Exactly. So it just gives you a sense of, you know, where you can find something that you might be looking for. And so that's how the top half works. I'm going to reset this.
Okay.
Go back to 0. And I'm going to show you the freestyle option, which I just added this morning.
Oh.
Okay. So let's say a student already knows exactly the major that they're looking for, right? And they say they want to major in biostatistics, right? So pretty obscure, pretty narrow the thing. All you need to do is start typing bio, enter, and it will return it for you. And you see that there were 32 degrees in biostatistics offered in 2020. So not a lot of places offer biostatistics, but by far and away the biggest program is University of North Carolina, Chapel Hill. And the other ones, well, there's Scranton, St. Louis U, you know, all, and for some reason zeros are showing up, they shouldn't. But Emmanuel College, I mean, Emmanuel might be a real surprise there, right?
Yeah, I think it would.
Yeah, but it's not a big program. So let's say we're going to clear that out. We're going to go back to everything, and we're just going to get a little more broad in our look, right? And so it's going to be bio. And now you see every major in the country that's has the letters bio anywhere in it. So for instance, forest sciences and biology, right?
That's interesting.
Program.
I didn't even know what that was. Yeah.
Right. So now, all right. So Mississippi State, there you go.
That is surprising.
Auburn, yeah, Iowa State, Penn State. So what we're looking at is mostly big land grant institutions.
Yeah.
With programs in whatever that was I just clicked.
It was forest. Yeah, it was forest.
Biology, yeah.
Forest science and biology.
Yeah.
You know, I love this because I think, well, first and foremost, I love this because this doesn't have and this is really important to me, a lot of cookies. And what I mean is like not like cookies as in like cookies that you eat, right? But like I think a lot of students don't realize how many times their data is tracked when they're going through these search sites.
Oh,
And so that's for me the one big advantage. But then two, I like it because it allows students to maybe explore things that weren't necessarily on their horizon, and kind of seeing even within, you know, bio programs that there are so many opportunities here, and maybe put a school on their list that maybe they didn't feel like was going to be on their list. Because I think one of the things that happens is the US News and World Report rankings, for whatever else we want to say about them, it's just easy for students to find colleges because they're like, okay, this is a list, I'll find a college here. But they don't necessarily know, is that college offering the programs that I am looking for? And a lot of times a college that's on a student's list will say, well, we don't have that program, but we have this similar program. And then the students' dream of going into this program kind of dies, and they just allow themselves to be expanded just by the representative. But here you can kind of go in and say, does other colleges on my list actually doing the degrees that I'm looking for, and what other colleges should I be putting on my list to look at?
And you can use this a third way. Let me show you that. First of all, something went a little funky. So you can always hit this little button down here at the bottom that says reset, and it will take you back to the initial view if you ever get stuck. So that's a little tool tip. Let's say you are a student and you want to go to a public university in the state of Oregon, just randomly choose.
Yeah, just random.
That's why I chose
what college would you recommend in Oregon?
Well, it depends on the student, really. So now I'm just looking at public institutions in the state of Oregon, and you can see by looking at the color, the sort of orientation or the character of the university. And so, for instance, at Oregon State University, my institution, you can see all this purple, which means STEM, right? Click on the thing in the legend and you can see STEM majors. You can see Oregon State's a pretty big STEM school, right? Oh, well, I'd rather have humanities. Well, not so much at Oregon State for humanities, or at least, you know, you can still get a great education anywhere, but if you want a big department or a big program or an institution where humanities are the main focus, it looks like Portland State or University of Oregon might be better for you, right? Or agriculture. This is going to surprise you. There's only one place to go. The biggest grant institution in the state, which should be no surprise to anybody, right?
And,
so you can.
And I feel like we use the word land grant a lot, and we didn't define it. So for students who aren't aware, I'm going to do my best to define it, and then I'll also have you jump in. For me, as somebody who went to a land grant, my understanding is that we got the land, I would say controversially, but we got the land to build the college. And that means that we have a commitment to the state to ensure that we have opportunities for things like agriculture, or essentially the way I always thought about it is like things that you would actually get your hands dirty. So the careers that really keep the state going in terms of farming, production, things like that. What's your definition?
Yeah, so the Morrill Act of 1862 granted one institution in every state a certain acreage of land, and they could use that land any way they saw fit to provide for the education for the citizens of that state in what they called the practical arts. And so what you'll find is if you look at something like engineering, for instance, there's a lot of institutions like Penn State, Texas A&M, Purdue, Ohio State, University of Illinois, Arizona, Arizona State, Iowa State, North Carolina State. You notice the word state in the name a lot. And that's because typically there was already a flagship in those states. So Iowa already had the University of Iowa. This grant went to develop Iowa State University. Michigan already had the University of Michigan, so the land grant went to develop Michigan State. In Indiana, it was Indiana University, and then they created Purdue. So it's not Indiana State. In Oregon, it's Oregon and Oregon. And those land grants tend to have programs that are more practical. So for instance, if you're looking for it's a graduate program, but a College of Veterinary Medicine, almost always at the land grant institution. You know, it was designed to create and serve things that were practical in nature and, you know, contribute. And then there's also usually a land grant and extension service, which is something sort of disconnected from the research components and disconnected from the education. But here at Oregon State, we're in every county in the state with an extension office. And so all sorts of public service and problem solving, you know, if you have problems with growing some certain plants in your yard, the experts in the extension service can teach you about that stuff.
Yeah.
Or you want to start home brewing, right? We have our College of Agriculture have people who are expert in hops and barley and the things that you use in beer, and they can show you how to brew better beer for yourself. Or if you want to start a new business in brewing, those are the people that can get you pointed in the right direction, right?
Yeah,
so,
I didn't even realize that as somebody who went to a land grant. Yeah.
Yeah, so there probably is a Virginia Tech Extension Service.
Oh, there's definitely a Virginia Tech Extension Service. I just didn't realize. I never made the connection of like, what would they do? Yeah, because we're Virginia Polytechnic Institute and State. Yeah,
exactly. They're almost always in the extension services is always in the land grant. And so you are right, there is controversy regarding land grant. Our former president said, you know, we have to acknowledge that much of the land that was given, quote unquote, to start these was in fact stolen from Native American people. So, you know, our former president, I was surprised and gratified to hear him stand up and say, we need to come to terms with what it means to be a land grant institution, right? Yeah. And so, you know, your commitment to the state and the people, and especially those people from whom the land was stolen, is really an important consideration and something I think we all need to pay more attention to going forward.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, I think I like this tool because it allows students to explore. I think a lot of students, and we kind of get into this online a lot, and I think sometimes we're online and we don't realize like the students aren't necessarily always there, but we talk about how the rankings don't necessarily reflect what could matter to you as an individual student. But here you have a tool that kind of takes away a hierarchy, which I don't think is necessarily the best thing at all times, to have hierarchies, and kind of focuses in on what matters to you as a student.
Yep. So let me give you one other tool that students can use. If you can share a link to Higher Ed Data Stories, which is my blog. I do all this higher ed data visualization. This is freshman migration stuff. And so while you go and you find 10 schools on the Major Finder, you can do some more research on them. I mean, on my blog, I have admission rates. I have you know, endowment, I have financial aid, I have all sorts of stuff about individual institutions. But you can also take a look at any two colleges and look at their geographic.
I love this.
So let's go to 2018, which was a more normal year than 2020. Okay.
What happened in 2020?
I don't know. I heard about something. So 2020, we want to compare. Let's look at Duke.
Okay.
And we want to compare North Carolina State. Two institutions in the same state, but very different. University. All right. So you see that Duke has 30% of its students from the Southeast. North Carolina State has 90% of its students from the Southeast. Right. So you can compare two institutions in 2 years and say, you know, I really like North Carolina and I want to be around people from the Southeast all the time. Right. Or gosh, I like the Southeast, but I like to be around people from all different backgrounds and places of origin. Well, if that's the case, Duke's probably a better option. If you like people who are like you and from your own place, and you're going to live in that part of the country, you decided, maybe North Carolina State's a better place for you. That's an exact example. But you can see, what if it was Notre Dame, for instance, and you wanted to compare, right? So you can see between those two. So
this is really cool. So people just go here, and then you said that there's one for financial aid. I don't want to put you on the spot if you don't know what that one is.
There was one on discount rate. I'm waiting for the newest data to come out so it can give you a sense.
I will keep me posted. I definitely want to know that. Yeah.
Well, you need to follow me closer on Twitter, Jen.
I do. I follow you on Twitter. But I feel like the algorithm gives me, more the, back and forth, know.
Sure.
Yeah.
But there's up here at the top, there's all posts, and you can scroll down and see that I've ever posted on higher ed data stories. So if you're interested, there's a wealth of information. Here's some interesting stuff about, for kids who are interested in pre-med, medical school admissions data, if that's
that's really helpful.
It's a couple years old, but you can see who gets admitted. It's the high GPA and high MCAT scores, right? Not surprising.
Yeah, and I always tell people, I think it's not a good idea to necessarily just say, I'm only going to a college that really has a really good pre-med program, because you might shift as somebody who went to law school and decided not to be a lawyer right after that. I always tell people, give yourself enough space. So even looking back at your other tool, saying to yourself, I want to go to a college that has a broad swath of humanities, allows me to kind of, if I just don't like this one particular major, there's other opportunities there. And so looking at this and kind of looking at data to put together a plan of what do I need to do and how do I need to do it, and not necessarily looking just emotionally at everything, is advantageous for most students.
Well, and again, an expert will tell you that medical schools these days love philosophy and English and history majors. They want people who are well educated. You have to have some science classes, but you don't need to major in chemistry or biology or physics.
Yeah.
And interestingly, if we circle back to one of the first things we talked about, in 2017 and 2018, if you had a 2.2 to 2.39 and an MCAT of 494 to 497, 2.7% of those applicants were admitted to medical school.
Yeah, so there's a place for you.
If you're talking to that student, you're going to say you're never going to get into medical school, right? And if you work in medical admissions, you're going to tell students you are never, ever, ever going to get into medical school. But one person
was ambitious
and said, damn the torpedoes, I'm going for it, and got admitted. So
I mean, I think that's the thing, is I think a lot of students hear, and you talked about this earlier, where you hear, oh, we had, even when somebody says we had 95%, and I know you know who I'm talking about, we had 95% admitted with test scores. That does not mean that they were admitted because of their test scores. That might mean that they are just admitted with this other thing, but you kind of look at the data, but also I always tell people, if it's a school that you go to sleep and you wake back up and you're like, I still just want to apply, just let them tell me no.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah,
I will tell you, every year there is one or two students who are not rich, who are not well connected, because that's very different, right? But who come back and they say, I was admitted here, and I'm like,
how'd that happen?
Not even I just pretend yeah, of course you were, right? But if they had asked me at the beginning of the season, would you think that this is a place that I'm going to get admitted? I probably would say, I'm a lawyer, so I would say, maybe. Right. And my maybe is usually a no. But I think that's the thing. Take the data, but don't necessarily count yourself out just because there's data not in your favor. Apply in favor of your data, but also don't limit your chances elsewhere, because there might be a place that sees potential in you.
Exactly. Yep.
Yeah. Well, anything else that you want to tell the students this year, especially? I know that they're worried that everything in admissions has changed since COVID. Any parting words of advice that you could give them?
Well, I would say yes, everything has changed, but everything outside of admissions has changed too. So,
Okay.
go with the flow. And I guess the best advice you can give everybody is pay attention to the things you can control and don't worry about the things you can't, right? There are so many. It's not that admissions is a crapshoot, but when you apply, you don't know whether your file is going to be read first thing on a Tuesday morning by an admissions officer or last thing on Friday by an admissions officer. You have no control over that. There's no way, oh gosh, I may have just created an industry of people.
There are people who believe in timing it, and it's like, that's not, it still has to go through a computer system. So that's not how it's going to work.
So, it's, there's stuff you can't control. Don't worry about that.
Right. And then I always tell students, just as long as you're proud of your application, and I know that sounds so, I'm going to say hokey, but it sounds so hokey to say, as long as you're proud of your application, you should get to a point where you're like, this is who I am. And the colleges need you more than you need them. So there's going to be a college out there that sees you for who you are, but also it's weird because we say, do the personal essay, do everything, don't take it personally at the same time. So just know that it might not be because they think that you're horrible. It might just be they just don't have the physical capacity to take you on, or they don't have the financial capacity to take you on. So
it's not about you, it's about the college usually.
Where can people send questions to you?
Sure. Yeah. So go to jon.social, and you can find all my ways to contact me.
All right. Well, thank you so much. I'm going to stop the recording. Thank you so much for coming. And
my pleasure.
Bye.